A lot of people panic when they read Hebrews 10:26. They think it means if you sin after you get saved, like drinking, anger, whatever, you lose your salvation. But that is not what this passage is talking about. I'll show you what it actually means. The first thing you have to do is slow down and ask the right questions. Who is he talking to? What was going on when this was written? Because if you miss the context, you will misread the whole verse. And let me say this plainly, every believer still sins. Nobody completely stops sinning after they get saved. That is why 1 John says, if we say we have no sin, we deceive ourselves. So this verse cannot mean one failure and you are finished, because that would contradict the rest of Scripture. Now, watch the context. Hebrews 10 does not start at verse 26, it starts at verse 1. Verse 1 says, the law was only a shadow of the good things to come. In other words, it was a preview, not the final picture. That matters because Hebrews was written to Jewish believers, people who were used to animal sacrifices to try and deal with sin. And on top of that, they were being pressured and persecuted for following Jesus. So some of them were tempted to go back to the old system just to avoid the pressure. So the writer is showing them something. Those sacrifices were temporary. They were never meant to be the finish line. Verse 3 says those offerings were a reminder of sins every year. Verse 4 says it plainly. The blood of bulls and goats could never take away sins. So what is he saying? The old system could point forward, but it could not fully save. It was a preview. Christ is the fulfillment. Then look at verse 10. We are sanctified through the offering of the body of Jesus Christ, once for all. Not once until you slip, not once until you fall short, once for all. Then verse 14 says it again. By one offering he hath perfected forever them that are sanctified. That is the point. Jesus did what the old sacrifices could never do. He finished what the law could only point toward. Then it goes even further. I will put my laws into their hearts, and their sins I will remember no more. And verse 18 closes it. There is no more offering for sin, meaning that whole system is done. There is nothing to go back to. Jesus' one-time sacrifice was completely enough. So now go back to verse 26. If we sin willfully, this is not talking about a saved person having a bad day. It's about something much deeper. It's about knowing the truth about Jesus and still rejecting him, going back to the old system like his sacrifice wasn't enough. In other words, if you hear the gospel, if you know Jesus is the only sacrifice God accepts, and you still turn away from him, then there is nowhere else to go for forgiveness. That's why the warning is so serious. The writer is saying, you cannot go back. You cannot leave the real thing and return to what was only a preview. Then verse 28 makes it even stronger. If rejecting Moses' law brought death, how much more serious is it to reject the Son of God, to treat his blood like it means nothing, and insult the Spirit of grace? So here's the context. Hebrews 10:26 is not mainly about a saved person messing up on a bad day. It's about deliberate rejection, turning away from Christ's final sacrifice and going back to a system that could never save you in the first place. That is the warning.